Now let's talk about the key concept of these header files. Suppose you are doing some kind of experiment on light, but you do not have the necessary resources to do the experiment. So what you can usually do, you can borrow that particular book from the library, and in return the library provides you that book. The same thing actually goes for the C library here. Suppose you want to calculate the square root of 90.5, but you do not want to develop the code yourself. So what you can just do, you can just ask the C library to provide that necessary function to you, so that you can just calculate it. So what you are doing here, you're just asking to the C library to provide you the necessary header file like math.h, so that you can do the necessary calculations. And in return, the C math library is providing you that necessary math.h file. Now you can just calculate the square root of 90.5, because the necessary function has already been included here within this math.h file. So this is the key concept here. So what this header file actually, this header file, as you can see that they have this extension like .h. Now why you are calling them these header files? Because we are just placing them on top of our entire program. So that is why we are just calling them the header files, because they are being placed on the top of it. Now this header file contains the declarations of functions, constants, and other constructs that we are going to use in our program. This .h is actually the extension that we can just identify them with, that this is the header file. So this stdio.h header file actually contains the standard input output functions, and this math.h header file includes the mathematical functions. To include these header files, we must have to use preprocessor directive like hash include. As you can see that the hash include is a preprocessor directive. Now why we are calling it this preprocessor? It is doing some kind of processing before something. Now what is that something? That is the compilation. Before compilation we are doing some processing here. That is why we are calling it the preprocessor. Now what this hash include is directing, that we must have to include this necessary header files to our program before doing the compilation. So let us understand how this preprocessor is actually working. Suppose this C program is developed with this C source code. This C program is first checked if there is any kind of preprocessor directive or not. I mean, if there is any kind of hash include or any other kind of preprocessor directive or not. If there is any preprocessor directive, then the preprocessor will add the necessary content to the program first. Suppose if there is an stdio.h file, then the necessary input output function to be included in our program, and the newer version of the code will be compiled. But if there is no preprocessor directive, then we do not need to pass it to the preprocessor, and we can just easily compile the source code there. Now as you can see, if there is no preprocessor directive, and if there is any preprocessor directive, at the end we must have to compile the program. But if there is any preprocessor directive, the preprocessor will add the necessary files first, so that all the necessary functions that will be required in our program gets readily available to the compiler. Now let me give you the proper example of this preprocessor directive and header file here. Now as you can see that here at the beginning we have written this hash include stdio.h. Now this hash include is the preprocessor directive, and this stdio.h is the header file. Now with this hash include stdio.h, it is quite clear now that we have included all those necessary input output functions to our program. This printf function, as you can see, this printf function also is residing within this header file too. This printf function is also a part of this header file stdio.h, because this printf function has been declared here in this stdio.h. But in our previous example we have never used this hash include stdio.h. Still our program ran. How it is possible that without including this stdio.h header file we still can use this printf function? Okay, well, there is a catch here. The only reason behind that, printf function has been defined as a part of C language. So because of this is a very important function, this printf function, the C program has included this printf function as a part of the C programming language. So the compiler automatically adds this printf function on behalf of you, including this hash include stdio.h header file in your program. Always remember that we must have to use this header file to use the necessary function that we want to use from the C library, because though the C compiler is including this printf function for you, still it will generate some kind of warning, because you are not complying with the rule of C programming language. So what is the necessary rule here? That you must have to include the necessary header file here. Now for printf function, to use this printf function we have to use this stdio.h header file, and to use any kind of mathematical function we have to use this math.h header file. So it is always a best practice to include the necessary header files here in our program.